grateful to have these wonderful moments to learn together, to also express and to appreciate how we as a Temple Emanu-El community are coming together to help with our carbon footprint, to help reducing our carbon footprint so that we can be an example for our congregants and for our community. We do this every year, have our Green Week, on and around Tu B'Shvat, because it is the new year for trees, because it is our time where we can appreciate what is going on around us in the world as far as nature is concerned, especially in the land of Israel where this is obviously based, but here too, as we prepare for the spring to come and with the blooming of the trees and the flowers, we remind ourselves the importance of our connection to the land of Israel, and also the land in which we are right now in Atlanta, Georgia. And so we are so proud to be taking this work seriously and working to reduce our carbon footprint. And as a faith community, we hope that it is a symbolic exemplar for our congregants and for the community around us to do what they can, whether it's adding solar panels, driving electric, planting trees, working on their recycling and reusing, and anything that it's possible to help and improve our climate and to help our environment. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Robert Wittenstein, our co-president, to introduce our speaker for this evening.
Thank you very much, Max. Good evening, everyone. Before I introduce Joanna, I want to do two things. One, I want to thank Temple Emanu-El's Green Team. We've got Karen Singer and B. Grossman. I had a momentary senior moment there. Both here today, and both are our co-chairs for the Green Team. We've done really an enormous amount of work over the last several years, and we should be very proud that I think Temple Emanu-El is leading among Atlanta area synagogues in terms of the things we have done to be environmentally conscious. And we are on a journey which we're nowhere close to finishing, but we've eliminated disposables from most of our events. We're reusing and cleaning dishware and glassware and silverware, and we've switched over from fluorescents to LEDs, and we've made a number of other changes to our systems that allow us to be more environmentally conscious. The other thing that I want to do is to encourage all of you to join us tomorrow night when we're going to have Mark Elliott speaking, same time, same bat channel. Mark is a climate scientist for the Weather Channel, and Joanna and I have gotten to know him reasonably well over the last couple of years through the work that he and us are doing with the Georgia Climate Action Network, JCAN Georgia. I've heard the talk he's going to give tomorrow night, and it's really insightful. And while it is a little depressing, there's a happy ending. The end of it is, here's all the things we can do to actually do this better. So I would encourage you to tune in 7 o'clock tomorrow night for that talk. So now I'm going to introduce Joanna. She is the current chair of the Jewish Climate Action Network of Georgia, and most recently has an affiliation with the Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, which is called GIPL. We have worked with GIPL extensively over the last several years to help prioritize many of the changes that we've made in our building. Joanna received a Bachelor's of Economics from Barnard and a Master's of Public Health from Emory University. And after working in project management for Emory Healthcare and Emory University for 10 years, Joanna pursued her passion in sustainability through various volunteer roles in the Atlanta public school system and her religious community, which is Shereth Israel, by the way. Her recent appointment with JCAN Georgia and GIPL served to strengthen her commitment and abilities to promote environmental stewardship in the Jewish community. When she is not pulling recyclables from trash cans. Joanna can be found baking small batches of chocolate baklava. I got to pause because my wife, Susan, got me some of Joanna's chocolate baklava for Hanukkah. And I am not sharing. It is really good. She also has 2 boys and a dog, and they live in Morningside. And with that, let me welcome Joanna Kobelifker.
Does this, yes. All right. Okay. Thank you, Robert. Yes, I'm Joanna Kobelifker. I am the community organizer for the Jewish community for Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. Our talk this evening is going to have sort of 4 main learning points. First, I'm going to explain why climate change is so hard for us to mentally understand and take action. I'm going to talk about why the faith community has such a very special and unique role. I'm going to discuss evidence of the Jewish value of sustainability and what you can do. So why is it so hard to take action against climate change? I imagine most of us who are in this room and listening to this believe that climate change is real, which it is. And you can see in this picture the smog and the pollution. We've seen the pictures of the drowning polar bears. So why is it so hard for us to then do something about it? Well, there's 3 reasons that most people think of, and those are listed here. Political polarization. We all are too familiar with this concept. The Democrats blame the Republicans blame the Democrats, and then nothing happens, no decisions are made in Congress. Disinformation, which really refers to some of the world's biggest producers of oil and gas intentionally launching disinformation campaigns to obscure the climate science change and ultimately derail efforts to reduce fossil fuel emissions. And then there's overwhelming difficulty. And this is really just what I call the mountain of burden that we all feel when we think of all the changes we have to make as individuals. It never seems like enough, and it all seems so hard. But interestingly, the hardest thing that challenges us is our own minds, and I'll explain. So why do our own minds make it so hard for us to understand climate change and do something about it? Well, it turns out we are literally wired to care most about the here and now. So us, me, and the present in this moment. So if we were sitting in an MRI right now, we could see how a specific region of the brain lights up when we are told to think about different things. The region of interest is the medial prefrontal cortex, or MPFC. When we are told to think about ourselves, this region lights up like Times Square on New Year's Eve, pre-COVID. When we are told to think about family members, it lights up a little less, maybe Times Square post that first wave of COVID. When we are told to think about a total stranger on the other side of the planet, there are little to no lights, like Times Square in March of 2020. Economists have a name for this. They call it the social discount rate, which quantifies how much value declines as we look into the future. Basically, our brains have a default setting that makes it harder for us to behave in a way that will benefit our future selves rather than our present selves. Studies further reveal that your brain sees your future self as a stranger, and therefore you exhibit much less self-control to make pro-social choices that will benefit not just you, but help the world in the long run. We're less likely to resist temptations, more likely to procrastinate, less inclined to exercise, less motivated to save for retirement, more likely to give up when frustrated, and ultimately less likely to feel concern or try to prevent long-term challenges like climate change. So where does the faith community have a role? Well, turns out People who practice faith are often believers in concepts that cannot be seen. We may not personally or literally see the benefits, but we believe them to be true, and the future is unknown. This is a very common attribute of people who identify as being people of faith. Faith communities are instrumental in leading social change that is otherwise hard to mobilize and motivate change. Historians have documented that faith leaders were the driving force to shift American society during the industrial age away from the exploitation of workers and toward more cooperative forms of economic life. As one researcher puts it, these faith-driven progressives insisted that society and governments uphold the fundamental notion that all people are equal in God's eyes and deserve basic dignity, freedom, political rights, and economic opportunities in life. So and we identify these to be true as Jews as well. And speaking of Jews, okay. So what's some evidence in our Jewish texts that really support that we have a value of environmental stewardship? There's a lot. Our texts are rich in wisdom that reinforce the value of environmental stewardship. Bal tashchit, which means the sin of waste. The commandment of bal tashchit, can I cancel? Sorry. The commandment of bal tashchit, which is do not destroy or waste, has long been considered central to a Jewish environmental ethic. The famous Jewish philosopher Maimonides summarizes the sin of needless destruction, saying, "Whoever breaks vessels or tears garments, destroys a building, blocks a wellspring of water, or destructively wastes food transgresses the command of Bal Tashchit." The late Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs calls this the halachic basis of an ethic of ecological responsibility. Tikkun olam is a phrase we use a lot. It's often translated as repair the world. Another interpretation or translation means to do something with the world that will not only fix any damage, but also improve upon it. Lador vador, from generation to generation. A major theme in Judaism is the importance of passing on the teachings, values, and traditions of our faith to sustain future generations. Show kindness to the stranger. The Jewish sages tell us that we must treat strangers with kindness and love them as ourselves. This commandment is mentioned 36 times, more than any other commandment or prohibition in the Torah. The rabbis take such great pains to remind us of the importance of kindness because we have been in need of such kindness countless times in our own history. We have been outsiders. Exodus says we have to know the soul of the stranger. We know the soul of the stranger because we are the stranger. Our blessings and our prayers and our rituals. Virtually every blessing we say when we eat acknowledges where that food comes from. I won't recite the Hamotzi, but you know how it begins, and it ends with Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brings forth bread from the earth. When we eat fruit, Borei pri ha'etz, who creates the fruit of the tree. For vegetables, Borei pri ha'adama, who creates the fruit of the ground. And Tu B'Shvat, we have an entire holiday dedicated to celebrate the birthday of the trees. And Sukkot, we are encouraged to eat and even sleep outside in a sukkah and relive our days in the desert, to gaze upon the stars in the night sky and mark the beginning of the rainy season. We have always been people of the land. This is our call as people of faith, to inform ourselves about where our energy comes from and take responsibility for our actions, reduce our dependence on fossil fuel energy, consider the impact of our environmental decisions on marginalized communities, and advocate for clean energy at all levels of public policy. So how do we do all this? Well, the good news is Temple Emanu-El is already doing a lot of this. You, as Robert said, you have a green team, and that is a green team that is part of Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, GIPL, and much of our work is really under 3 pillars. We provide education, carbon-reducing solutions, and policy. The education is really when we work with our green teams. We have classes and workshops. Our carbon reducing strategies are some of the programs that Temple Emanu-El is currently enrolled in. PowerWise is the program where an energy audit is completed on your facility. We identify opportunities to reduce energy waste, replace either lighting systems or heating and air systems to be more energy efficient and smarter. WaterWise is a program that looks at the usage of water. SolarWise is a program where we can provide a free solar assessment for your building. And we have a new program called Zero Waste. And this is a program where we look at basically what are you throwing away? What are you buying to begin with that you then have to discard? Is there a way that you can reduce that amount? Can you recycle it? Can you reuse it? Can you compost it? So that's a new program that we've just launched. And our third pillar is policy. And a big part of that work is really using our voice to advocate for those that can't and to really push for better policies that support climate legislation. So the theory of REACH is that you start with a green team, and the green team may be as small as 3 people. And they begin this work, and the congregation that they're in gets wind of their work, and more people join the team, and you have clergy supporting this work, and then it grows to the entire community. And that's sort of how grassroots movements work and grow, and that's exactly what's happening here. So we have over 20 classes and workshops that are available. These are taught by practitioners, professors, and scientists from around the state. We can also create a new class if you're interested. We also have a special workshop called Active Hope, which will qualify you for seed grant money through the 4 Directions Fund, and that's often a nice amount to start a garden. But let's talk about environmental justice. The definition is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. What does that really mean? It means we cannot combat the climate crisis without achieving social justice. We know firsthand that our most vulnerable and disenfranchised populations are often hit. That's right. Real water here, not in plastic. We know firsthand that our most vulnerable and disenfranchised populations are often hit first and worst when it comes to climate change. Lower valued properties are frequently flooded, polluted, and shadeless. Children in these neighborhoods often have patches of asphalt, which also translates to hotter local temperatures as play surfaces rather than tree-lined parks. These areas may also have contaminated water and soil, more polluted air, and less access to natural resources and fresh food sources. As individuals and congregations, we have a powerful voice to advocate for justice, equity, and change. We really believe that policy change is our moral and religious duty. We have advocacy workshops that we can work with your teams to really empower you to use that muscle. We can lead letter writing campaigns, and we really do this together. And the more of us that do it, we're much more powerful together. What's exciting is we just launched in 2022 monthly eco challenges. And this again serves to make it even easier to do this work. And this is, again, only for registered green teams, so you guys are good. And every month we have a different challenge. And each challenge has 3 components. There's a learn, an act, and an advocate component. And the theme for January, in honor of Tu B'Shvat, is trees. So the learning piece, we send a blurb of information, and we talk about how trees are one of our best defenses against climate change as they act as carbon sinks, drawing carbon from the atmosphere. The act is to plant a tree or attend an upcoming Tu B'Shvat tree planting, which 2 are planned this Monday for MLK, and there's another one the following Sunday on the 23rd. And lastly, to really have a call to action, to advocate. And this month, our advocating piece is to protect the Okefenokee Swamp. I'm I have to share about the Okefenokee Swamp. Has anyone been there? It sits it's in the southern part of Georgia, almost in Florida. The Okefenokee Swamp has deep roots in Georgia's culture. It's home to thousands of species in its cypress forests, pine islands, and blackwater channels, and supports hundreds of jobs. Unfortunately, the Okefenokee is unsafe and threatened by industry, with Twin Pines Minerals seeking to develop a titanium mine near the refuge's eastern boundary. The fate of the mine hinges on decisions made by Georgia leaders in the state's Environmental Protection Division as they consider 5 environmental permits the company must secure to begin operations. It's vital that we protect the wildlife and communities that rely on this natural resource. In preparation for the 2022 Georgia legislative session, we're encouraging our members to take action by sending a message to Georgia legislators and the Environmental Protection Division to protect the Okefenokee Swamp. It's that simple. It's a small group of people can just say yes to a permit, and the mining will begin on a ridge that's just next to the Okefenokee Swamp. If you're interested, there's a video you can watch called Sacred Waters. I believe it's free on YouTube, and it's a beautiful summary of what the Okefenokee is, its history, and what the current threat is. The other policy topic is coal ash. Another terrible thing. Coal ash. The problem with burning coal for electricity has to do with the coal ash that is left over. Coal ash is the sludge-like waste left over from burning coal, and it contains cancer-causing toxins like arsenic, mercury, lead, and other heavy metals. You can see in this diagram that when unlined coal ash ponds sit below the water table, coal ash leaks and contaminates the groundwater, which harms our rivers and gets into domestic drinking wells. Currently, the majority of the 6 million tons of coal ash that has been produced in Georgia is being stored in 29 unlined ash ponds across the state. Most of the ash ponds are located adjacent to Georgia's rivers and streams, from the banks of the Chattahoochee River to Lake Sinclair to the Savannah River on the coast and the Flint River in South Georgia. About 19 of these ponds are in the process of being excavated by Georgia Power. This is great. However, what about the others? So for those remaining coal ash ponds, Georgia Power wants to cap in place, which means they cover the pond without excavating it first. This would allow the coal ash to continue leaking into the groundwater. This leads to an important conversation about environmental justice and ensuring that all communities suffering the impacts of coal ash get the same treatment in terms of excavation and removal of coal ash. Recent disasters in surrounding states spilled toxic coal into rivers and across people's lands in the Southeast. And in recent years, pollution monitoring by power companies shows that these unlined pits are leaking and continue to contaminate Georgia's groundwater. Unsurprisingly, these ponds are often located in poor minority communities who arguably have less bargaining power with their local politicians. But there's some good news. The good news is, again, we are not alone doing this work. We have a lot of partners doing this. We have local and national partners who have been working in the space of combating climate change through a Jewish lens. These are groups that are doing the important research to guide us toward carbon-reducing strategies that are most viable here in Georgia, and that's Drawdown Georgia. We have groups that arm us with the right information to urge our local and federal policymakers to support climate legislation, and that's Jewish Earth Alliance and Dayenu. And we have Jewish groups that highlight the Jewish values of environmental stewardship through meaningful educational resources, and that's Hazon, the Jewish Federation, and JCAN Georgia does all of the above. And really, none of us are alone, but the more we do this together, the better we'll be, the more impactful we'll be. And I will pause for questions.
Thank you very much, Joanna. All right. So my wife tells me that I left my phone at home. So I can't look at the Facebook comments and ask questions. But if you have a Facebook question, Marina's in the back, and she'll bring her phone out, and we can use them. In the meantime, if there's anybody in the sanctuary who has a question, we'll take that now. Yes, Karen. And I'll repeat the question for the folks who are online. So the question that Karen asked for our online audience deals with how do we take the concept of environmental justice and bring that as educational material to our children, right? So how do we, we've got a religious school with 230-something kids. How do we get them to understand what our responsibilities are as a Jewish community for ensuring that environmental justice becomes a priority and that they begin to understand their role in that?
Well, I would say more literally, we do offer a youth activism class that's really intended more for teens or young people, and that's where it's a very clear connection to environmental justice. We teach them what does activism even mean? What does it mean to advocate? Why is it important? And we connect it to, whatever faith group those groups of teens are from. For children, we tend to start, kind of light. We talk about planting, the importance of plants, but I think there's certainly an opportunity to talk about why we help one another. And going back to the helping the stranger and being kind, and those are such strong themes in Judaism, and there's so many lessons that we could teach children. So Hazon is really our go-to source for a lot of curriculum, and we haven't aggressively targeted young kids. We are working more and more with teens, with youth groups, just because those groups, we can text them, they're more easy to mobilize, but our intention really is to work with supplemental Hebrew school programs like in synagogues, and really work with their education directors and really come up with lesson plans that make sense for all ages.
Yeah, and I'll add to that for younger kids, the first step is probably making them conscious of waste and recycling, right? It's getting them to understand that the little plastic cups are a really problem, the straws are a problem, that all the packaging that they encounter is a problem, that the trash that we take for granted, but just by throwing it into the bin is a problem. So for younger kids, what we really want to be doing is getting them to be conscious about turning off the water while they are brushing their teeth, right? It's all about the little things that we want them to establish as patterns. And then later, it's easier to talk about the disparate impact that some communities feel because land is cheaper in disadvantaged communities, and that means that polluting industries are moving into places where land is cheaper, and those people are being disproportionately impacted. But let's start by creating environmental kids. Any other questions? Yes, Max. So Rabbi Max's question was, when we look at synagogues and churches and other institutional nonprofits, how do we see them working specifically to set the right example to reduce and reuse and conserve?
I would say almost every single congregation that we've worked with wants to start recycling, if they don't already. And we've learned that it's oddly very hard to set up recycling for churches and synagogues because they're not residential units and they're not business, so they often have to use a third party to come and pick up their waste. We did this at my synagogue. Sometimes it starts with a bar mitzvah project. A family really wants to buy the bins, but then someone has to pay for the monthly service. But we start helping them with their recycling. So we'll find out, what county are you in? If we know of other congregations that have done this, we'll say, well, this congregation is near you, and they called this waste management company. So we've done a lot of that. We're also, though, moving to the next question is, well, what are you trying to recycle? Why are you buying so many plastic water bottles that you then have to recycle? Maybe don't buy them to begin with. So that's kind of where the zero waste audit is really helpful. It's looking at, well, what are the materials that you're trying to more responsibly throw away? Is there a way to reduce purchasing them in the first place? And a few congregations are very interested in composting. My synagogue was able to kick that off right before COVID, sadly. But we were able to use real forks for our kiddish lunches and compostable everything else. So the plates, the napkins, the food all went into the appropriate bins, and the forks were real. And so those went into a different bin, and they were washed. So that was a huge achievement. I think it's definitely a viable option for other congregations, but you do have to really look at what are the materials that you're trying to reduce, reuse, recycle, and see what you can eliminate kind of upstream, if that helps.
And I'll add a postscript there that we do have recycling here at Temple Emanu-El. So paper and plastic and aluminum all get recycled. We do have a contract with a third-party vendor. We've got a separate dumpster outside, and they come by and do that. We aren't yet doing composting. We do a little composting up at Garden Isaiah, but that is something that if there's a will in Temple Emanu-El, we could undergo. We have the capability to do that. Right now, the biggest source for compostables is the preschool downstairs. But we also have big parties here for Friday nights. We could be working with our catering vendors to get them to help us separate things that could go into compost bins. And that's something we haven't yet tackled, but if there's a will out there, this is certainly something we could do. Yep, Joel. Yeah, so the question had to do with coal ash ponds, and the question was how many of the existing coal ash ponds is Georgia Power just planning to leave in place versus remediating? And what was the other half of the question? Yeah, and is there a plan to address those? Although the plan would be that we would lobby the Georgia State Legislature or the Public Service Commission to require it. Without the Georgia Public Service Commission requiring it, nobody is going to do it, right? The Georgia Power won't do it. And do you have something online there? Okay. So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, there are 29 unlined coal ash ponds, and 19 are going to be excavated. So that leaves 10 that are just going to have that cap on, which is just putting a lid on it. It's a problem that I think not enough people know about. And again, another plug for a free documentary. There's a documentary called Saving Juliet. It's filmed right here in Juliet, Georgia, which is right near Macon. And it really shows how a community is suffering firsthand. They have a rise in cancer cases that they can link to their contaminated water, and you show them going to the state capitol, and they're waiting outside to speak with the governor. Spoiler alert, it's not a happy ending, but there is another bill that's going to be in the session, and that's the type of information that we would disseminate with your whole congregation so that you can click on a link and send a letter.
Here online do you want to read it, or from Davida?
All right, Davida Steinberg asks.
Hi, Davida.
Traditionally, American Jews whose families may come from poverty in the old country have loved to show off material acquisitions. Obviously, there are phenomena now of showing off your green purchases, like Teslas. how to balance what group of active environmentalists with more frugal or even hippie-style faith-based environmentalists that try to prevent the purchase of all, of all, or prefer upcycling or buying used, or to find those groups working together well in our local Jewish community.
What was the exact question? Is it more a statement? I heard.
Yes, I'm not sure yes, it's more of a statement than a question, right? Which is,
That we can be role models in this way. We can sort of demonstrate that you can be sustainable and also be fashionable, I guess. But you can really be proud of the choices that you make that are more sustainable and talk about it and talk about the connection and why it's important. You know, I've worn the same dress for Rosh Hashanah 3 years in a row. You know, I mean, I don't know if I have, maybe I have, but you know, maybe you normalize that.
all right, you have a question? So the question was, how does Georgia Power select which coal ash ponds to remediate and which ones to cover?
I don't know the answer. I do know that excavating is way more expensive. Hence, that's why they don't just excavate all of them. And excavating means exactly what it suggests. They have to dig up the coal ash, drain the water, take the coal ash somewhere, another landfill that's lined and far away from water, whereas they cap on, they sort of drain what they can, but then they put a lid on it, and that's obviously the cheaper option. So to transport it is very, very expensive. So I don't know how they decide. I think for sure maybe the larger ones are more expensive. I don't know. But I know that cost is a huge, huge factor in why they don't just excavate all of them.
I'll add to that a number of years ago, at Georgia Power's request, the Georgia legislature passed a bill that provides Georgia Power with a liability waiver from any damages that occur from any of their coal ash ponds that leak. So you can no longer take Georgia Power to court for civil damages in the event that you somehow suffer adverse effects of a coal ash pond that has leaked into your water. I don't know. I know it has to do with civil litigation around damages. I don't know whether transfer is involved or not. Yeah, B.
On that issue of coal ash, I mean, Georgia Power for certain things falls under the Public Service Commission, other things, EPD, and then obviously our state representatives. You know, so I think, you know, one of the key takeaways too is local, like PSC and elections matter. And I think something that could really help would be, you know, and I've seen it in some of the election cycles, but people's environmental, you know, candidate stance on some of these issues so you can make the most informed decision. And sometimes it's very difficult to get that information. So that would be something that would be very helpful. You know,
Yeah.
visuals should provide during the election cycle so we can be as informed.
Okay, so let me see if I can summarize B's point, which is that Georgia Power is regulated by the Public Service Commission, by the Environmental Protection Agency, and by the Georgia legislature. And we, as voters, have an opportunity to influence those people, especially during election cycles, when holding them accountable for their environmental positions as regulatory agencies can be really important. And one of the things that B is suggesting is that GIPL can be particularly influential in helping to notify people when issues have come up that require immediate action, right? So calls to action for legislative action. Did I paraphrase that reasonably well?
And also, if there's an election, that if there's a way to sort of show what that individual's environmental platform looks like, if that's information that we can share with the public in a nonpartisan, way, of course.
Yes, right. Yeah, Max. So what Rabbi Max is asking is, are there specific hotspots in the metro Atlanta area where we could focus attention and do the most good to help remediate issues that exist today?
Okay, so you mean areas, populations that we could help, maybe those that are don't have a tree canopy, can we plant trees there? Food insecurity, things like that. Right. I mean, it's typically the obvious. The urban areas are often the ones that struggle with access to natural resources. But really, the coal ash ponds are all over the state. So if you wanted to help the populations that have toxins in their soil and water, that's here. It's all over the state. So it kind of depends on what problem do you want to solve. But I think any of us, we all, however, in this room, we could each pick something to advocate for. I think what's helpful about, these monthly challenges and having, GIPL sort of guide us is that we can sort of pick the big one, and then all together as a collective, we all, overwhelm the inboxes of, the Environmental, Protection Division for coal ash. And then the next month, we can really address, the shrinking canopies in the urban areas. So it doesn't exactly answer your question, but it kind of depends on what the issue is.
So, Joanna, I seem to remember that there is a national organization that does letter writing every month.
Yes.
Help us understand what they do.
The Jewish Earth Alliance is great. They are based in Washington. It's completely volunteer-led, and the way they were modeled pre-COVID is you actually would handwrite letters. They would, go to this office, and then someone would go in person and deliver those letters to the appropriate offices. So it was very real, tangible, hands-on. With COVID, though, now it's maybe one person goes and they have to disseminate, or maybe it's more emails. But what's great is that Mirala Goldsmith, she's the person who started Jewish Earth Alliance. Every month she has it's always at the federal level, so it's nothing state specific. There will be whatever the bill is at hand. She will describe it. She'll have a Jewish connection, and there will be an opportunity to click on a link and write a letter. They're very thoughtful and very well written, and it might even be once a month that she offers. You can actually participate in a network call and learn more about a specific bill. So the monthly eco challenge goes to the green teams. So I'm sure Robert B. or Karen probably saw that email, and it's our first month doing it, so we're kind of learning what's helpful. How do we really mass disseminate it? We're trying to encourage the green teams to send it to your entire congregation, and it's a one-page challenge. So it has the little section, the learn, the act, the advocate, and there's links, and it's very self-contained, and it's as simple as that. You click on the link, and it will help you populate a letter and send it to the right person. I'll make a note to make sure it gets sent again.
I do not see any other questions, so I want to take this opportunity to thank Joanna from coming all the way outside the perimeter to meet with us today.
No problem.
It has been both enjoyable and educational, and we very much appreciate you being here. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.